After 7 years undercover, I finally returned home. My wife had prepared a full table of food and was waiting for me, but as I was happily eating, I suddenly noticed her fingers were rhythmically tapping on the tabletop. The next second, my blood ran cold. This rhythm wasn't just random tapping, it was clearly Morse code. I kept eating without looking up, but my fingers were quietly translating her tapping under the table. Escape quickly. There are 15 bugs hidden in the house. At that moment, my heart sank, and my chewing instantly froze. I slowly looked up at Lingxi. On the surface, she was still gentle. "Hubby, you've worked hard away from home all these years. I made all your favorites today just to nourish you, so make sure to eat a lot." But her eyes were filled with fear and pleading. She was using all her strength to signal me to leave. I forced myself to swallow the food in my mouth. A storm was raging in my heart, but I couldn't panic. 27 years of undercover life had long since taught me the ability to control my emotions. The more dangerous the moment, the calmer I had to be, so I put down my chopsticks and smiled at her. "Yeah, home-cooked food really is the best. It's just that it was a long trip, and I'm a bit tired, and I've gotten quite dirty. I'll go take a shower and change first." A flash of anxiety crossed Lingxi's eyes, but it was quickly hidden. "Okay, go ahead. I've left the water heater on for you, so you can wash right away." So I stood up and walked toward the bathroom. Every step seemed relaxed and steady, but my muscles were already tensed, ready for combat. After closing the bathroom door, I didn't rush to turn on the shower. Instead, I held my breath and began to check the small space, the vanity, the ceiling, the vent, the toilet tank. I didn't miss a single corner where something could be hidden. Sure enough, I felt a hard object inside the toilet tank. I didn't take it out, but instead used my fingertips to lightly trace its outline. Based on my years of experience, I analyzed that this was the latest military-grade bug, with an effective range of 300 meters, capable of clearly recording heartbeats. Cold sweat instantly poured down my forehead. This was clearly no ordinary surveillance. Professional surveillance of this level is lethal. My heart sank as if someone was clutching it. Who was it? Was my mission exposed, or was Lingxi being controlled by someone? What exactly was their goal? I quickly reached out and turned on the shower. The loud sound of rushing water instantly masked most noises. I slowly leaned against the cold tiles. Taking this chance, my brain began to work frantically. 15. Lingxi said there were 15 bugs. That meant this house had long since become their monitoring room. They could hear us even if we just farted. This wasn't a home anymore. It was literally the Truman Show. But should I escape now? No. If I just up and left, what would happen to Lingxi? Since they could install 15 bugs in my house, it meant they had complete control over Lingxi. The moment I ran, she would lose her life, so I couldn't leave. I had to stay and see who exactly was behind this. So I quickly rinsed my body. When I walked out of the bathroom, there was no trace of emotion on my face, and I even carried the specific relaxation that comes after a shower. By then, Lingxi had finished clearing the dishes and was sitting on the sofa, laughing happily at a variety show. I knew she was performing for those eyes and ears. I walked over and sat next to her, took an apple from the fruit bowl, and began peeling it with a small knife, circle by circle. "Wife, you've really worked hard keeping watch over the house alone these years." "It wasn't hard. Having you back safe is better than anything. It's just that my dad's health hasn't been great lately, and he's always talking about wanting to see us. Could you go back to my parents' house with me tomorrow to see him?" The movement of the small apple in my hand suddenly stopped. The Morse code she tapped earlier didn't mention going to her parents' house. This was new information. I stared into her eyes. They were full of hints and pleas. I instantly understood the parents' house she spoke of wasn't the real one. It was a secret code only the two of us understood. An emergency contact point we agreed upon before I left. A place that was supposed to be absolutely safe. I handed her the peeled apple. The peel hadn't broken from start to finish. "We'll go back to see Dad first thing tomorrow morning." Early the next morning, as day was just breaking, Lingxi and I got up. We washed up and had breakfast together like an ordinary couple. She helped me tie my necktie, and I fixed her hair. Before leaving, she held my arm and leaned her head on my shoulder. "Hubby, I'm a little scared." Her voice was very small, carrying a genuine tremble. I knew she wasn't afraid of going to her parents' house, but afraid that today's trip would be ill-fated. I patted the back of her hand reassuringly. "Don't be afraid, I'm here." These words were meant for Lingxi, but also for the people behind those 15 bugs. I wanted them to believe I was just an ordinary husband who hadn't been home in years, and that my words were just expressing affection for my wife. Then we prepared to drive away. Before getting into the car, I circled it as usual. The underside was clean with no trackers, and there were no new bugs inside. It seemed those people were quite confident that the 15 bugs in the house were enough to control my everything. Just as the car pulled out of the neighborhood, a black Buick appeared in the rearview mirror. They followed at a moderate distance. I couldn't help but sneer inwardly. As expected, they had come. Lingxi saw it too, and her body instantly became rigid. "Don't look back." I reached out and turned on the music. The cheerful pop songs masked our nervous heartbeats. When the green light at the next intersection had only 3 seconds left, I didn't slow down. Instead, I floored the gas. The car rushed through at the very last moment of the red light, while that Buick was blocked by the red light, unable to move. Did we lose them? It's not that simple. I looked calmly at the rearview mirror. Professional tails wouldn't just use one car. Sure enough, in less than 5 minutes, a silver-gray Volkswagen appeared behind us. Lingxi's face turned pale again. "Don't worry yet." I comforted her softly, while my brain quickly planned a route. I couldn't drive directly to the agreed-upon safe point. That would make the target too clear, and be equivalent to telling the other side they were exposed. I had to go somewhere first, a place that could confuse them and give me a chance to shake these tales completely. With a turn of the steering wheel, I pulled into a side road. This road led to the most crowded wholesale market in the old city. I knew every alleyway here, like the back of my hand. When I left 7 years ago, this place was a warm memory. Now, it had become my battlefield for escape. In the rearview mirror, that silver-gray Volkswagen was still biting hard. I didn't slow down and rushed straight into the market gates. The wholesale market in the morning was a cacophony of voices, with tricycles and vendors with carrying poles blocking the road completely. I honked the horn frantically, and the car body almost brushed against the crowd to squeeze through. Lingxi sat in the passenger seat, her face pale, but she didn't scream. Her hands gripped the handle tightly, her eyes fixed on the tracking car in the rearview mirror. I suddenly realized that in these 7 years, she had long since learned how not to scream. In front of a stall selling dry goods, I slammed on the brakes. I signaled her to get out and buy a bottle of water. She was stunned for a moment, then immediately understood my meaning and pushed the door open to get out without hesitation, finally disappearing into the crowd. Her back looked very thin, but her steps were so steady. I quickly opened the trunk and felt for a palm-sized black box under the spare tire. This was a signal jammer I had equipped 7 years ago. I never expected the first time I'd use it would be in my own hometown. After I pressed the switch, the signals within a 5-meter radius instantly dropped to 0. Taking this chance, I pulled 2 jackets out of a hidden compartment in the trunk, one gray and one navy blue, both the most ordinary styles. Lingxi returned quickly with a bottle of water in her hand. She didn't speak, just looked into my eyes. I quickly draped the gray jacket over her and rolled her original beige trench coat into a ball, stuffing it into the bag. 30 meters away, that Volkswagen had already stopped. Someone was looking around from inside the car, indicating the signal was lost. I caught a glimpse of a familiar figure getting out of the car. That back was upright, and his gait was powerful. Even in plain clothes, he couldn't hide his professional habits. Zheng Feng, my classmate from the police academy. How could he be here? My heart skipped a beat, but my face showed no change. I pulled my hat lower and led Lingxi deep into the crowd. Passing a homeless man curled up in a corner, I stopped. His build was similar to mine, and his grimy face was full of numbness. I took off my jacket and draped it over him, patted his shoulder and stuffed several bills into his hand. Then I pointed at my car and made a driving motion. His bloodshot eyes instantly lit up. He grabbed the jacket and walked toward the car. I pulled Lingxi and ducked into a narrow alley piled with cardboard boxes. Soon after, the sound of a car engine came. The homeless man drove my car out of the market. Meanwhile, Zheng Feng stood where he was and lit a cigarette, his profile looking exceptionally strange through the smoke. At the end of the market, there was an abandoned sewer entrance. 7 years ago, I had personally pried open the iron grate here. Back then it was to hide top-secret intelligence, but now it was for survival. I lifted the iron cover, and a stench hit us. Lingxi covered her nose but didn't shrink back. I climbed down an iron ladder with rusted rungs. The sewer was dark and damp, with occasional light leaking through cracks overhead. Rats scurried around our feet. Lingxi gripped my hand tightly, her nails digging into my flesh, but she never made a sound. We walked for half an hour in sewage that was knee-deep before finally climbing out from a remote greenbelt exit. Outside was a quiet street. That abandoned mahjong room was still there, the glass covered in dust, and the rolling shutter door had become extremely rusty. I pushed open a gap with my shoulder and squeezed inside. It was piled with old tables and chairs. Lingxi sat alone on a broken chair, panting heavily. I was about to comfort her, but the next second, my gaze suddenly froze. That old wall calendar on the wall was still stuck on July 7 years ago, but behind the calendar was an extremely subtle reflection, the antenna of a bug. I walked over and gently lifted the calendar. It was a black device about the size of a matchbox. The signal was still the latest military grade, and the indicator light was still on. It was working. My blood froze instantly. No one knew about this safe house, yet this bug had clearly been installed for a long time. Who could have found this place? The back of the man smoking just now flashed through my mind. Could it be Zheng Feng? I stared intently at that still operating bug, feeling a cold sensation through my touch. This safe house was exposed, yet no one had come to arrest me, which meant the other side didn't want to catch me at all. They just wanted to watch my every move, waiting for a more important person to appear, my handler, or the evidence I had hidden. Lingxi stood up from the broken chair and walked to my side. When she saw the bug behind the calendar, her pupils contracted sharply, but she didn't cry out or panic. She silently took 2 steps back, using her body to block that direction. Then she pointed to the pile of dust-covered junk in the corner. I followed her finger and saw a set of Chinese chess pressed under some rotten wooden boards. She went over, took the chess set out, and set it up on the table, signaling me to sit down and play a round with her. At a time like this, I was in no mood for chess, but I immediately understood her intention. Bugs can collect sound but cannot see our movements. The chessboard became our only tool for communication. She made the first move, knight 2 to 3. Her hand was steady, but her eyes were fixed on my fingertips. I understood. She was asking me if I needed to call for backup. I picked up a cannon piece and placed it in the middle, cannon 2 to 5. This was telling her that the house had already been turned upside down from the inside. There was a mole. Her eyelashes fluttered, and she lightly brushed a tissue over the chessboard. That was a little trick we played when we were first married, using the board to convey real language. She moved a pawn, pawn 5 to 1. A pawn across the river can only move forward, not backward. She was telling me she had been pushed to a dead end with no way back. My heart felt like it had been violently pierced. How much had she faced alone this past year? I moved a piece. Rook 1 to 2. A rook moves boldly. I was going to tear this situation wide open. She suddenly slammed a piece onto the board. The sound was exceptionally clear in the empty room. It was an elephant she moved. An elephant is a defensive piece, but she placed it in the wrong position. That wasn't a normal move at all. She was using the landing spot of the piece to tell me something else. I stared at that spot, my brain working rapidly. The elephant landing there. Position 3. 3 months. What happened 3 months ago? She continued playing, each step deliberate. A picture gradually pieced together on the chessboard. 3 months ago, a group of people knocked on my door. Those people were in uniform, holding IDs, saying they were my colleagues and that my undercover mission had failed and I had been killed. They were there to notify the family and to bring the hero home. Lingxi's hand was shaking, but her moves remained steady. They said the organization wanted to give her closure and let her personally welcome me home, even if it was just my ashes. They set up a mourning hall in the house, in that home where we lived for 10 years. Lingxi agreed, crying like a true widow. But what they didn't know was that she had long ago learned how to observe. When those people were setting up the mourning hall, they were too efficient and too familiar with every corner of the house. While they were hammering nails and hanging curtains, they conveniently hid things in the walls, under the sofa, inside the chandelier and between the mattress layers, 10 bugs in total. They weren't there to bring a hero home. They were setting a trap, waiting for the real hero to jump in. Lingxi's eyes turned red, but she didn't cry. She just made another move. This move was a check, meaning, why did you come back? You knew the house was a trap, so why did you come back? I looked at her, and remembered how scared she was in the sewer. Yet she bit her lip and made no sound. She desperately told me to escape, yet I still came back. And she unhesitatingly used the chessboard to tell me the truth because she knew there was no escape. Since I was back, we would face it together. I moved a piece to protect the last line of defense. From now on, I will protect you. She finally couldn't help but cry, her tears falling and splashing onto the chessboard. I reached out to wipe the water stains off the chessboard and continued to play. Every move was composed because we knew the people behind the bug were listening to the sound of the pieces falling, listening to a couple who hadn't seen each other in 7 years play chess. They thought we were passing the time, unaware that a life and death exchange had been completed on the board. Just then, Lingxi suddenly looked out the window, a flash of terror in her eyes. I followed her gaze. Outside was the abandoned street, empty except for the wind blowing. But I understood her meaning. Someone was coming, and not just anyone. My muscles instantly tensed, my hand already on the knife handle at my waist. Who would find us just as we arrived here? Was it Zheng Feng or the people behind those bugs? I slowly stood up, shielding Lingxi behind me. Just as I was about to move toward the door, 3 meows unexpectedly came from outside. Who's out there? I instinctively pulled Lingxi further behind me, my fingers already touching the knife handle. The cat calls were too precise, 3 of them, neither long nor short. That was exactly the emergency meeting signal Zheng Feng and I had agreed upon years ago, but only he knew about this place. Could it really be him? I stared at that broken window. Moonlight shone through the dust-covered glass, and I could vaguely see a dark shadow flash. Then the door was pushed open. Creak. The decayed hinges let out a piercing scream. Zheng Feng stood at the door, wearing a black jacket. With a familiar smile on his face, he said, "Old Lin, I knew you couldn't die." He strode over with open arms, but I didn't go to meet him. I just caught Lingxi's eye out of the corner of my vision. My right hand gently made a fist and then opened it by my side. This was tactical hand sign language meaning, hide and prepare a weapon. Lingxi nodded imperceptibly. She quietly backed up 2 steps and disappeared into the doorway of the back room. Zheng Feng didn't seem to notice her. He grabbed me in a hug and pounded my back, his voice thick with uncontrollable excitement. 7 years, 7 whole years. I thought I'd never see you again. I patted his shoulder, but my muscles were very tense, because when he hugged me, I felt his body also testing me. His palms were lightly pressing on my back as if feeling if a weapon was hidden at my waist. I released him and looked him over with a smile. "How did you find this place?" He lowered his voice, his expression becoming serious. "I've been following you since the market, but I'm not here to catch you. I'm here to save you. There's a traitor in the organization. Someone wants you dead." He spoke urgently, his eyes full of sincerity. "When I saw you lose the tail at the market, I knew you'd realized. I took a shortcut and followed you all the way. Old Lin, now I'm the only one you can trust." I stared into his eyes. Those eyes were as bright as they were 7 years ago, but I always felt something was off. It was too similar, almost as if it were a deliberate imitation. I took a step back and leaned against the table, my hand casually touching the chess set. "Since you say there's a traitor, I need to confirm you're still you." He was stunned for a moment, then laughed. "Still, the old rule's a code, right? Fine, ask away." I spoke 3 words: sycamore tree, tin box, stormy night. This was an emergency identification code known only to him and me. He hardly hesitated and immediately replied, "Under the sycamore tree, bury the tin box, move on the stormy night." It was all correct, not a word out of place. My heart relaxed slightly, but then he added another sentence. "Old Lin, We've used this code for over a decade. How could I forget? It's just that this damn place is too stuffy. It's incredibly hot." As he spoke, he raised his hand to wipe sweat from his forehead. The moment his hand went up, my gaze fell on the web of his right hand. There was a thick layer of calluses, but the position was wrong. Someone who shoots long-term should have calluses between the thumb and index finger from gripping the pistol. His calluses, however, were right in the palm, the mark left by long-term use of a combat dagger, specifically one held with a reverse grip. My heart sank abruptly. If he knew the code so fluently, there were only two possibilities. Either the real Zheng Feng had turned traitor and given up the codes, or the man in front of me wasn't Zheng Feng at all, but an imposter trained through plastic surgery. He was still wiping sweat, muttering about the ghost of a weather. "Old Lin, is there any water? I'm dying of thirst." I pointed to the bucket in the corner. "Pour it yourself." The moment he turned around, I caught a glimpse of a small bulge at his lower back, the position for a miniature walkie-talkie. Only professional trackers would carry one of those at all times. My mind raced. I had to confirm immediately who he really was, but without alerting him, I looked up at the dim yellow light bulb overhead and suddenly had an idea. "This damn place is too hot. It's suffocating. Let's open a window for some air." He nodded without suspicion. As I turned, my hand naturally found the power switch on the wall. It was an old-fashioned 20-year-old knife switch. One pull would cut the power. I walked back to the table, picked up a scrap of newspaper to fan myself, and continued to stall him. "Zheng Feng, do you know how I spent these 7 years?" He sighed, his eyes squeezing out a look of sympathy. I know everything. You've suffered. But now that you're back, you have to listen to me. I have a way to get you out safely." I stared into his eyes. They didn't have the impatience and impulsiveness Zheng Feng should have, only calmness and calculation. I was 90% sure in my heart, but I needed one last piece of evidence. I put down the newspaper and stood up. "No, it's too hot. I have to take my jacket off." Just as I turned my back to him, my right hand violently pulled downward. Click. The entire room fell into complete darkness. The power was out. It was pitch black. Impossible to see one's own hand. Lingxi wouldn't make a sound in the back room. The man should also be unable to see anything, but I was prepared. My hand pressed against my old mechanical watch. The edge of the dial was coated with luminous material, allowing me to vaguely see its outline in the dark. More importantly, I had already fished a pair of night vision goggles out of my bag and gently propped them before my eyes. In the darkness, everything turned dark green. I saw the man. He didn't move, and he didn't reach for a gun in panic. Instead, he instinctively reached for his waist, but not for a gun. He was tightly protecting the position of that miniature walkie-talkie. His other hand was pressed to his ear. It was as if he was listening for some command. A real policeman's first reaction in the dark is always to aim their weapon to control the threat, not to assist their communication equipment. He wasn't a cop. He wasn't Zheng Feng at all. I moved soundlessly behind him, my gun already drawn from my back, and the safety off. At that moment he yelled in a low voice, "Old Lin, what's going on?" I pulled the trigger, not to fire, but to press the cold muzzle directly against the back of his head. Snap. He froze completely. "Don't move." My voice was very calm, but filled with killing intent. He slowly raised both hands. In the darkness came his low laughter. "Hehehe, Old Lin, what are you doing? I told you I'm here to save you." I ripped the walkie-talkie from his waist, threw it on the floor and crushed it. Then I raised my foot and kicked hard against the back of his knee. He fell to his knees with a thud. At that moment I reached out and pushed the power switch back up. The lights came on. In the blinding light he remained kneeling on the floor. On that face, which looked exactly like Zheng Feng's, there was no anger, only a weirdly calm expression. He slowly turned his head to look at me, his mouth curling into a mocking arc, his eyes full of provocation. "Kill me then, Lin Zhen. Go ahead and shoot." I stared at him, the muzzle pressed against his brow. He sneered, "If you shoot me, the real Zheng Feng will never come back." My finger froze on the trigger, my blood felt like it had instantly turned to ice. "What did you say?" He chuckled. "You think you have the skill to find him? To tell you the truth, Zheng Feng is still alive, but only I know where he is. If you blow my brains out, he dies with me." My head thundered. The face before me became incredibly hideous. He was a fake. Then the real Zheng Feng, the one I shared a bunk with at the academy, the brother who risked his life to send me intelligence while I was undercover, was being held somewhere, suffering and waiting for me to save him. My breathing grew heavy, but the gun didn't move. Lingxi poked her head out from the back room. Her face turned pale when she saw this, but she didn't make a sound, only bit her lip hard. The man kneeling on the floor looked at me and laughed even more wildly. "What? Don't dare to shoot? Aren't you supposed to be so capable, Lin Zhen? An undercover for 7 years, and you've even gotten your own brother caught." I suppressed the storm in my heart and pushed the gun further against him. "Say it! Where is Zheng Feng?" He just squinted his eyes and didn't speak, only nodding with his chin toward the broken walkie-talkie on the floor. I understood. When he was protecting the radio earlier, he was waiting for commands. Now that the radio was broken, his contact with the outside was severed. But that also meant the people outside knew he was exposed. What would they do to Zheng Feng? Countless horrific images flashed through my mind, but I couldn't kill him. He was the only clue to finding Zheng Feng. I slowly pulled back the gun, but the instant the muzzle left his forehead, he suddenly lunged. His right hand pulled a glinting dagger from his lower back and thrust it straight at my throat. My body instinctively leaned back, and the blade grazed my chin, bringing a chill. My right hand grabbed his wrist holding the knife, and my knee drove hard into his abdomen. He let out a sharp grunt and doubled over, but I didn't let go. Instead, using his momentum, I swung his entire body and slammed him onto that old mahjong table. With a loud crash, the table shattered. He lay among the broken boards, panting heavily, his knife having flown far away. I walked over and stepped on his chest, the gun once again pressed against his forehead. He looked up at me, blood seeping from the corner of his mouth, gasping out a few words. "Just shoot." I didn't shoot. I just stared coldly at him, increasing the pressure of my foot. As his ribs began to groan, his hand started fumbling on the floor, trying to find something to fight back with. I kicked his hand away and knelt down, shoving the gun barrel into his mouth. His eyes instantly widened with terror. I stared into his eyes and asked, one word at a time, "Where is Zheng Feng?" He made muffled noises, unable to speak. I pulled the gun back slightly. This time, I